Okay, I'd like to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Lake Forest Planning Commission for September the 27th, 2012 to order. If we could ask Vice Chairman Anderson to please lead us in the pledge.
Would everyone please stand? Ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record, we'd like to note that all 5 commissioners are present. That will take us to our consent item. Back up. Public comments. This is a time where if there's anyone in the audience that wants to address the commission on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, this is your time to do so. Is there anyone in the audience who has something they'd like to address the commission on that is not on tonight's agenda? Okay, well, seeing none, then we will move to consent.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Second item tonight on the public hearing items. We're going to have a little opportunity here to address the commission. If there's anyone here that would like to address the commission on that, make a public hearing. But in light of information that's come there, we do, and in the interest of transparency, I'm going to suggest that we actually continue this item. We'd like to address staff, or ask staff to go ahead and work with the applicant and the public to bring this back to us on the November the 8th meeting, if that is agreeable to you gentlemen. And at that time we can reopen the public hearing and have some more discussion on it.
Could we have a little discussion?
Yeah, we're open to discussion.
Okay. You know, we've seen and we've heard from the community their concerns. We have some similar concerns. And I think that it would probably be well advised for us to give staff our comments on some direction on what should be done and what we want to look for and what we may want to expect if we're going to bring this back, and maybe some of the justification for why we want to bring this back. So along that line, I'd like to make a couple of comments if I could. When the item was brought before us previously, community expressed some concerns pertaining to noise, pertaining to traffic circulation, being a hazard to young children that may be utilizing the facility and maybe using the parking area for recreational or casual activities. Also, there were some concerns about debris, tidiness, and some possible conflicts with neighbors. So one of the things that I would like to suggest is that in a time period that we can discuss as to what may be appropriate when staff comes back to us, that we have some information or some input on if there are any continued concerns or violations along the lines of what we've heard in the form of concerns in the past, so that we can have some sort of an objective basis for making a decision if we're going to, in fact, give them more time. I think they need to have an understanding of what it is that we're giving more time to do. So along that line, I would like to once again suggest that we have an opportunity to make sure they're going to be in compliance, so they can demonstrate that they can be in compliance with being good neighbors in general, specifically noise, specifically trash, controlling of people who use the facility, appropriate operating hours. And with that, I'll leave it to my fellow commissioners for any further comments.
Other comments?
Actually, Commissioner Hughes, I appreciate that input, because as I was reading through the materials, I kind of came to the same conclusions. I'd like to see staff come back to us with how things have been to this point, because we know, certainly from public comments as well as our staff report, that there's been an ongoing problem, that we had a problem with multiple violators potentially in this situation, and it would appear that we're down to only the applicant in the property at this point. So I think we'd have a better insight as to what's going on at the facility with that staff input.
Okay, the one thing I'd like to see, and it pertains to the period of time that all three were in the facility or in the area, and the two having left, and the subsequent reports that were taken by officers at the time. I'd like to have the time frames of when those reports were made by our officers, what times they were in relationship to what times the other two vacated the premise, in order to establish, if we can, what violation had taken place, and if there's been any subsequent from that point on. I'd just like to get a time frame of it.
Okay. Commissioner Zechmeister, anything to add?
Yes, but I will preface my comment with the fact that I was not here and present at the original meeting that the hearing took place, but I have read all of the information. I've studied up, done my homework, and the one thing I would just like to add to this is my biggest concern was that we make sure that all activities are kept indoors, and that if, and as any group, as they disperse, they're going to go out in the parking lot, what have you, but that we have that kept to a minimum, that we, we have no loitering. That was it.
Just if I could make one additional comment, just for clarification, and that is the action that was brought before us here this evening was a motion for an action to deny. And my rationale for suggesting the additional time and the considerations is that the applicant also has submitted an additional letter suggesting that some of these things would be appropriate for them to get fair consideration. And we want to make certain that, in fact, we're giving the applicant every opportunity to be fairly represented. And so that is the basis for my suggestion here this evening. Along that same line, we need to define what we think is going to be an appropriate time. 90 days an appropriate time, 120 days appropriate time. 90 to me seems like it gives us enough time to get some fair information, accumulate enough significant information that we can make a determination as to whether, in fact, the facility can be operated in compliance on a continuous basis or not. And in compliance, again, is going to be not using the alleyways for playgrounds, noise control, pollution control. So, thank you.
If I can just clarify, you're looking to run a 90-day test. Is that it? Time for staff to work with the applicant for feedback? I mean, is that what we're looking at here? And my question would be then also to the applicant, is that 90 days something they would be willing to work with? So if there's someone here from the applicant would like to address this, we'd certainly like to hear from you. Okay. We do need you to tell us your name and your city of residence, and you will need to fill out a speaker card, but we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, I did.
Got one? Okay.
Okay, good night. My name is Jorge Treve, and I'm the secretary of the United Pentecostal Latin American Church. And first of all, I thank you guys for the opportunity that you guys are letting us to talk tonight. We know that this is not the time that we had to talk. There was a public hearing for this, and it is actually, we are really thankful with you guys for this opportunity. As we mentioned in the letter, yeah, this is what we were pursuing. We were pursuing a period of time where we could be monitored, if that is the term that we can use here, and actually demonstrate that our behavior is, as we say in the letter, impeccable. We keep all the activities indoors. We have no kids playing around. We have noise control, and we have even accommodated our facilities per the requirements of the city. So that period of time sounds to us actually extremely fair from you guys, and we will be willing actually to be monitored by you, and you will see exactly that our behavior is per the city requirements.
Okay.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Then 90 days would take us into 2013, it looks like, if I'm looking at a calendar correctly.
Yes, that would take us to the meeting of January the 10th.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay. Peggy, do you have more speaker cards? Okay. Was there someone else that wanted to address us on this tonight? Okay. Okay.
Hi. I don't know if you guys want this first. My name's Alex Duran, and I'm a 4-year resident of Lake Forest. And I'm the one who authored that 4-page letter to the commission in opposition of this church, only because they displayed consistently their violations of many items, and I noted that in the 4-page letter. And I find this church to be very untruthful, and they keep violating the items that I noted, and there's still noise, and I still see a little bit of trash. But 90 days is beyond my comprehension, because we've tolerated it for so long, and not only me, but my other neighbors as well. And I would just ask to reconsider a 90-day to 30-day, because it's just been way beyond and all the things that I listed in my letter. So that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. Ken Piotr, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I have talked about this before, and I second what Alex Duran just said. I'd like to mention there, since I've lived in this area, there's actually been 3 churches there. One in 1978, one in 2005, and 3 in 2010. They've all been noisy. I've personally called the police 5 or 6 times. If I kept better track of my emails, I'd bring at least 5 in here that I talked to the Lake Forest police about kids running around in the back. This church writes a letter, and on here it tells me that this is potential racial discrimination. I'm getting tired of this. There's nothing racial about it. It's noisy. The kids aren't supervised. The pastor that we talked to, be it 3 churches, 2 churches, 1 church, gives us the runaround. They've talked back to one of my neighbors. I've had to call the police as recently as July 20th of this year. These churches have been here, the one in 2005, the 3 in 2010, with no Lake Forest permit. I don't see how that happens. You are the people that give these permits, but you allow a manager of the Forest Ridge Plaza to bring in unpermitted residents to those facilities, and we have to put up with the noise. And I'm telling you, we're tired of it. They also say in this letter that the noise has been confirmed by a resident. It has ceased or something. That is false. When I saw that, I just stopped reading this. And I want you to know this is not true. And I'm actually offended that people, my caliber, I'm a homeowner, for years have been calling the police. We do what you tell us. And you're giving this church 90 days. That's ridiculous. I oppose this.
Thank you. Okay. Jorge?
I just wanted to say that if something has happened 20 times with 20 different people, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen the time number 21 with another person. So I think the period of time that you guys are giving us is exactly what we were looking for. If you look at the 90-day period, for us it's even better to reduce it. But this is not our intention, because we are not planning to behave in 30 days, nor 90, nor 120. We are planning to behave for the entire period of time we operate according to the regulations of the City of Lake Forest. We have been the only city, the only church, I'm sorry, we are not even unpermitted. We are in the process of the permit. We have pursued the permit, we have paid all our fees, we are here giving our face. We have never operated in the dark. We have been receiving all these threats, and that is true, and we have the proof for this. And I think the facts speak more than anything that we can tell. So that period of time that you give us, even 30 days, 90, 120, is extremely fair for us. We thank you for the opportunity, and you will see exactly that the number 21 time that this happens completely overcomes the other 20. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wants to address us on that? Okay. Yeah, we do ask that you would fill out a speaker card as well. You have one? Great. Okay, if you give us your first name and your name and address, please. Your name and city of residence. We'll get that out yet.
My name is Gracie Duran, and I live here in Lake Forest. And I live, I'm Alex Duran's wife. And I can tell you, last Sunday I heard the church. So I understand they're saying that they're being good neighbors and they've quieted down. And on this letter they state, oh, well, it's the other church. We've heard it's the other church for the last year. I recall coming home on a holiday for a holiday party. It was in December, and the church was still going. And we broke up our Christmas party at 10 o'clock. We came back to go to bed, so it was peaceful. And the church was being loud, so we couldn't get to sleep. So it's been consistent. It's been going on for just about a year, or probably more. And we were standing in our backyard, and I said this the last meeting, and I know some of the commissioners weren't here, where a toy was tossed over the fence. We tossed it over. My husband tossed it back over. They tossed it back. So we got in the truck. We went over, and we said, the kids are throwing stuff in our yard. We'd really appreciate it if you'd stop. And they said, oh, no, it's the other church. There wasn't any other church in service. So, pointing fingers back and forth, oh, no, it's this church, it's that church. It's never our church. It's not zoned for a church. We're concerned for the safety. The only reason photos were taken of those children was to prove that it's an unsafe area, and it's not a good place for children to be playing. Somebody was peeling out this last week, and what if a child was there? They would have been run over, hit, possibly killed. It's a safety concern. It's not a zone for a church. It's not a good area for them. And they're not neighbor-friendly.
Thank you. Would you like to readdress us?
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing to this. It is strange for us that none of the businesses next to us have had any complaint about our behavior. If they are serving customers and they are hearing all this noise, how come they have never come to us saying, hey, you guys are being very noisy, please calm down? That's their way of living. They are addressing customers, helping customers, and they have been operating very nicely with us. We have been a nice neighbor to them as they have been to us. I really apologize for the entire Christian community about other churches that have been there before, but that's not our case, and we cannot be judged with a common factor. No, we are just this church. We have a name. We have been pursuing our permit, and that's only our request. Please treat us as an individual, not as part of a whole. We're just an individual, and try to judge us as an individual. And if we meet the specifications, the requirements of the city permit, we will continue operating to the satisfaction of the city. And if not, we will be willing to leave according to the city. But I think that if we have done everything properly, I think it is even the law that we are granted this period of time. And I think if there's somebody trustable, should be your staff. So let your staff decide what's happened all these days. it's going to be complicated for us. We have all the eyes and all the fingers pointed to us. Everything that happens to those residences or everything that happens to them is going to be derived from us, according to them. But we are accepting the risk because we know what we do, how we are, and the only thing we do is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ inside the church. You guys are telling us do it indoors, we're doing it indoors, and we will do everything possible to make everyone happy. We have invested a lot of effort, a lot of our heart is there, a lot of our money is there, and again, I thank you guys for the opportunity, and I also apologize for the other churches that we don't even know, that have been there since long time ago, doing this and causing this discomfort to the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, please go ahead and come to the microphone.
I think I mentioned, I'm Ken Piotr. I've lived behind this Forest Ridge Plaza for years. The gentleman said that there's no other business that the church is affected. That is false. And we tried to get one business here. He's still in Lake Forest, and he was in the Forest Ridge Plaza for over 20 years. He was a martial arts instructor. And he moved, and he told one of the neighbors, the reason he moved is the church, one of the three, and it's always, we never know which one, was messing with his property. So what he just said is false. He made another point that no neighbor has ever come to that church. That is false. In 2005, before I called the police, I went to the church assembly. There was about 150 people out in the parking lot between the medical center and the Forest Ridge Plaza suites. And I asked the pastor, once I got to him, what is going on? And they were just having a religious ceremony. I have nothing against religion, but not in my backyard. I went through this in '78 when there was a Jewish temple back there. Same problem. Okay? I wasn't smart enough to call the police then. I am now. And I've probably called them at least 6 times since 2005. So to say that no one has come there, I had another one, and I went there in 2010 in July. How do you think Officer Alvarez found out there was somebody in the Dragon Buffet that's unauthorized? It was this church. They had no right to be there. The officer wanted to know how they got the key. I thought somebody was breaking into the joint. I just walked by. So we've called numerous times. It's getting to the point where, is the police here? It's going to be a joke. How often do you have to call? That's my point. We're tired of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Carter?
Yeah, I was going to chime in before we turned it out to the audience, but I think 90 days is excessive. Based on what we were looking at previously, it was the mode of operation that had occurred in the past. And as I commented when we were going through the hearing initially, my concern was if it's incompatibility, it'll become present by the first complaint that comes in afterwards. And that was my basic reason for voting the way that I did. I would be in favor of a 30-day period of time to gather the information, to bring it before, and I'm not looking to justify or substantiate what is going to happen. I want to know what did happen and what was the cause. And if there's incompatibility, we need to ascertain that from record and then move on. So I would, 30 to 45 days is the max I want to go.
No, that's why I suggested November the 8th. Is that an agreeable time?
Jump in?
No.
It's November 8th.
Yeah, they'd have a little over the entire month of October, so roughly 33 days to, is that right, Gail, to get the reports done? About 33 days. Any other discussion?
Yeah, two things. And I don't have a difficult time going with a shorter time period. My rationale with a longer time period, it would be more difficult to be in compliance over a longer period than a shorter period. I mean, you can get things under control and maintain them maybe for 30 days. Can you do it 60? Can you do it 90? And it's possible if they can do it that then they've created a habit at that point also. One of the other things, and Mal, maybe you can help me here. One of the items that I've had a difficult time with this from the outset, and it's the hours of operation. And basically, the application, as I recall, requested for hours of operation, I think, until 10 p.m. And my suggestion would be, and my thought was at the time, that that's probably excessive, particularly with respect to the relationship of this particular unit to the residential properties, that something more in the line of 9 o'clock as a max would be more appropriate. And I don't know if at this stage, if we can impose that as a condition to be part of the review over the next 30, 45, whatever number of days we select. At this point, can we say, okay, we're going to review it for 45 days, and as a part of that, limit the hours of operation? I guess that's my question to you.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's no permit that's being granted at this point. So the church is operating, and it's permitted to operate precisely because they have a pending entitlement application with the city. So if the city wanted to reduce or limit those hours of operation, the commission could decide on that and ask the applicant for his acquiescence. However, the applicant has limited say precisely because there is no entitlement currently granted to the applicant. So if we wanted to reduce it to, say, 9 o'clock or 9:30 p.m., that's within your purview at this point.
Okay, so if we decided that we wanted to have an understanding of noise levels that might persist beyond 9 o'clock, then we could simply state that as a condition for something staff to collect information and input on. And being that I'm stating this in a public meeting, that the applicant then would be aware that that is one of the things we're considering, and make his own decision whether he wants to try and do any modifications of the behaviors in that time period. Would that be appropriate?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add a little more to Mal's question. Is it, since we're using this test period running through November 8th, is it also possible for us to curtail that time frame if we find that they violate any of our city ordinances in the meantime?
Is the question, can we curtail it in that 30-day period or,
Yes.
or after? Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we may want to rephrase that as far as any violations, because I think the current operation of the facility without a permit is in violation. So to say that any violation would be to say that they're not in compliance as of the time that we
Other than the fact that
take an
they're
action on
currently
this.
in their permitting process, so it doesn't seem that they would be in violation, but we need legal on that.
During the pendency of an application, a use is entitled to continue, with the exception of those instances where there are life safety issues that could arise with the use. So I think it is a good distinction to state that if there are violations of the code other than the operation, which technically isn't a violation because the entitlement application is pending, then we can address those as they arise.
You okay down here? Are we okay with the November 8th date? Do we want to move it to December? I mean, I'm open. And we look at the calendar, basically we've got one meeting in November, that's the 8th, and then the next time is the 13th of December. Do we want to move it to December?
Yeah, the concern we may have is if we take the earlier date, that really effectively gives them 2 weeks of data accumulation, and staff then 2 weeks to prepare whatever motion or action they want to bring back before us. So I think that's probably not giving us enough of an opportunity to really have an understanding of what's going on. The object here is to try and ascertain whether violations that would be inappropriate and intrusive on the neighbors are going to occur. And if we cut the time too short, we're not going to have an understanding what those conditions may be. That's my only concern.
Okay. So is there any objection to the 13th of December then?
No, I feel more comfortable with that. It gives them enough time to truly determine whether they're in violation or not. And since we're adding a stopgap in there that says if we have a violation that occurs in the meantime, it curtails everything immediately anyway.
Okay. Are we okay with this as staff?
Can we
okay.
have an understanding of desired hours of operation, even though we can't stipulate that, our understanding is if we want noise operational violations contingent upon those hours?
I think 9 p.m. is adequate.
Okay. So staff, you kind of have an idea where we want to go with this, right? Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. Hold on just a minute. Does the applicant understand where we're trying to go? Okay. Are we okay? We understand where we want to go with this?
And the date we're looking at is December 13th?
That would be the date, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah. So what we, all right, we just need a motion to continue. All right. So. Okay. Okay. You need to address this from the podium, please.
Problem. The question is, I think it's ambiguous in the sense that somebody referenced monitor. Now, the applicant here suggested from this mic, you fellas are going to monitor this. Is that true?
No.
Is it the homeowners? Me?
Okay. We
my neighbors? Is it code enforcement? Lake Forest Police? Let's be specific here, gentlemen.
Okay. Well.
Tell me.
If there are complaints from the citizenry, those will be in reports with the city, correct? And that's.
So you're telling me we're the monitors?
No, you're not compelled to monitor.
So then what are you telling me?
I'm telling you we're going to continue this item until December.
Who is monitoring it, sir?
Okay.
Be specific.
Code enforcement and the police department will take reports.
As well as the homeowners?
If you report something, that will be a valid report.
Okay, and apparently you didn't look at what we said over the last 5 years, but we will continue to do that. And I want to tell you something. I'm not the type of guy that's just going to make a phone call so these people don't belong there. If they do what they say they will, I don't care if they stay there for 40 years.
Okay.
But I have my doubts.
Yeah. Well, that's
You
what we're here to
understand that?
find
I'm
out.
not trying to be a smart aleck. And I don't appreciate your smile.
I didn't do anything.
Yes, you are. You're not listening. Okay? I've been here before. My neighbors have been here before. We've been insulted. And the guy writes a letter that's not even true. And you want me to understand what's going on. Well, I'm done.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Okay. We've got a motion to continue this item to December the 13th. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, do we want to go ahead and have the applicant bring his up here, or do we want to adjourn back?
We have, no, we're going to be conducting the workshop here because it is being recorded.
Right. Okay.
And before we get started, Cheryl had just a brief overview presentation.
That sounds good.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Commission. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction before while Ron gets our PowerPoint going. As you know, the Portola Center property is the 5th and final Opportunity Study Area project. You know, the Opportunity Study was a multi-year study which resulted in land use changes in over 700 acres of land, allowing for over 4,000 new homes. One of the citywide benefits of this land use change was a significant reduction in the amount of future traffic on the city's roadways. And specific to the Portola Center project, this site was formerly designated for up to 2.8 million square feet of business park and commercial uses, which would have generated approximately 48,000 average daily trips. By comparison, the Portola Center project, the general plan amendment allows for development of between 904 and 930 new homes and up to 10,000 square feet of commercial uses, resulting in a significantly lower trip generation of approximately 10,500 average daily trips. You'll see that information in your staff report. As you know, the applicant has requested this workshop based on some input they received at the initial workshop we had in July. At this workshop, they want to receive input on their current grading and retaining wall concept. They've recently submitted some revised tentative track maps that you've seen in your packet, and staff is still in the process of analyzing those. So this workshop is designed to give the Planning Commission and the public input directly to the applicant so that he can finalize those maps. With that, I'll introduce Stephen Haas, who is the applicant's representative, and take it away.
Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate that. That'll help me go a little quicker, too. I know some of this information you've heard before, and I do want to be respectful of your time. Mr. Chair, thank you for your time. We're back this evening talking about specific design issues for Portola Center related to retaining walls and how this site, which you had the opportunity to see back in July, has a different context than many of the other opportunity study sites. Let's see if we got this right this time. All right. Great. We turned on the on button. My name is Stephen Haas. I represent the project for Baldwin & Sons and for Sun Ranch. There are two property owners. We have several members of our development team here this evening. If you have specific questions, hopefully we can answer some of those as we progress. Our project represents approximately 200 acres and approximately 900 units of the total that Cheryl had mentioned earlier. Tonight, we're going to follow an outline very similar to what you received in the binders with the information. We'll go through this a little quicker since you have seen quite a bit of this. However, we do have additional slides and can go into more detail. Clearly, the public hasn't had a full opportunity to see this. Some of this information was posted. I believe the actual binder information was posted on the website prior to this meeting. You've heard most of the project history from when it was originally entitled as Commercial and Business Park in the mid-1980s, some original dedications of open space in the 90s, of course the Opportunity Study, which changed the land use and the zoning for this particular site. We as a applicant team have had several community meetings ourselves that we hosted to start getting community feedback, and of course beginning in July of this year when we had the application was deemed complete, we had our notice of prep issued, the scoping meeting, and then the first Planning Commission workshop, where we now are formally in the public review process with the city as well as with the community. One thing that Cheryl didn't mention, concurrent with this meeting this evening, where we're talking about design of the project and retaining walls and the design guidelines that were adopted by the City Council several years ago, there are traffic workshops going on at the same time. We've held the first one earlier this month. The next one is scheduled for middle of October or late October, and there'll be several others after that. So on a parallel track, we're meeting with the community and with the city kind of a tripartite effort to look at existing traffic conditions as well as our project with the community. And a consultant has been retained by the city to help us with that effort. So I wanted to let you know that was going on a concurrent path. As you know from the site visit, there are several important items to take into account with respect to this site. Of course, the site location, previously planned for non-residential uses due to the air base, and that has now gone away with the BRAC studies. In looking at this area, we have existing infrastructure as well, with Glen Ranch Road and Saddleback Ranch Road that were built when Portola Hills was originally planned. Our adjacent land uses are primarily the Portola Hills community to the north, which is single-family and multifamily neighborhood. As we progress west on Glen Ranch, we do get into some of the industrial uses that have already developed. Probably one of the biggest ones is the Oakley facility. And then quite a bit of the site is surrounded by open space. There is no adjacent land use from an active standpoint. It's open space either owned by Southern California Edison or owned by Orange County as part of Whiting Ranch and other open space areas. The topography is probably the primary reason we're here tonight. This is not a flat site. We have several hundred feet of elevation change in various areas. That topography needs to be navigated with respect to a land use plan, and we're looking at how that context of that topography in this location actually can be used to create a site that is unique in many ways. The site is previously disturbed from the original entitlements, and you'll see from some of the exhibits that we have, the site has been graded and disturbed in many areas. And so we are working with a site that had begun to go under development, and then that was held in abeyance. There is a significant public facility out there right now, an interim facility for stormwater that takes care of all the water from Portola Hills right now that also needs to be addressed. As you can imagine, there's some pretty spectacular views from this site, as you saw as we toured the site back in July. There's also an existing trail network at Whiting Ranch that we would like to connect to, and we have obligations now with agreements to relocate that trail and provide trail easements for the use of the public, and to create some new trails that the public could enjoy. And lastly, we did dedicate land in advance to facilitate the regional sports park. We felt that was the right thing to do, since our project wasn't proceeding in a fashion that would enable us to execute certain opportunities that were in the development agreement. We were able, though, to convey land that was swapped with the county, and eventually that has turned into the, if you will, the ability for the city to accumulate the land for I believe it's Glass Creek, and to, I believe, sometime in the near future, to begin construction of that regional facility to the benefit of these the Lake Forest residents. This is the zoning map that was adopted by the council. You can see the site of the greater Portola Hills site. This is not coming up really well, but hopefully you can. There is a little bit of multifamily that is adjacent to the yellow outline of Portola Center, but primarily Portola Hills is a single-family community. So from a standpoint of the closest adjacency, the project was planned with single-family directly adjacent to the existing Portola Hills community. And then as you go south of Glen Ranch Road, you see a more mix of housing types in order to achieve a more balanced community, to put in some multifamily, and also to satisfy our affordable housing requirements. This is an aerial of the site. These pads on the north have been graded and have been disturbed. This is the area of the detention facility. And then there are some the large knoll, if you will, is in this area right here. This is the existing topography, so you can see some areas. My battery there it is. Oh, you can't. Yeah, the yellow and red doesn't work. The yellow areas are where it has been graded. It's fairly flat, but you can see there's still a tremendous amount of topography on this site with respect to the blue and the green that identifies the steeper slopes, in particular the slopes that are adjacent to the Portola Hills community, and then areas as you move south of the site as well. This is the existing 3D terrain model. This is looking to the east. You can see Glen Ranch Road in the foreground, and you can see Saddleback Ranch Road coming to the left off of that. We've identified the three parcels that are created by the existing infrastructure as the northwest parcel, the northeast parcel, and the south parcel. So I will refer to those as we go through this presentation this evening. This is looking north. You can see the large knoll right here. The graded pads that were rough graded for the northwest and the northeast parcels, the detention facility here, and then remaining topography as you look at the remainder of the site. And this is looking to the northwest. You can see this would be, if you were probably flying over the toll road, roughly, Portola South, and the topography that drops off into this natural open space area down to El Toro Road, Glen Ranch Road running pretty much right to left or left to right in the project, and then as you move up on Saddleback Ranch Road. And you can see from this site the elevation of Portola Hills well above the existing development area. And then finally, looking west, the significant topography that drops off to El Toro Road. Much of this being retained in this area here, as you recall our view from Painted Trails, that area there, which is pretty spectacular view looking up to the site, and much of that it will remain in open space. This is the site as it exists in a plan view. This property to the far left was the first property that was conveyed as part of an open space dedication. That was back in the 90s. In 2010, the area in green on the northwest side as well as on the northeast side was then conveyed to the city prior to tentative map approval, which was then, as I mentioned, swapped with Orange County. The city also acquired another property to sort of fill in the rest of the open space to facilitate the expansion of Whiting Ranch and put that in the county's control. And you see the three development parcels here. What we did in looking at the how to apply the retaining wall guidelines adopted by the City Council was to go out and look at the use of retaining walls in Orange County. As you know, there are many, many instances of retaining walls that have been used in Orange County. We like to think that there are some very good examples. We also know that there are some bad examples as well. So we wanted to go out and take some pictures and take a look at them and have the public look at them as well and get your impressions of those pictures. The reason for doing that is our staff reviewed the retaining wall guidelines, and as we looked at them, this is an applicant's view, if you will, of the retaining wall guidelines, of what we thought were very important in acknowledging the development of this site. There is some flexibility in the application of those guidelines. That was recognized not only in the guidelines themselves, but in the resolution that was adopted by the City Council. So some of the things that jumped out at us with respect to this particular site are that the site does have steep slopes and topography, that the site could be enhanced by the appropriate use of retaining walls. And that the context of the site is very important in determining that compatibility. We have different adjacencies. We have adjacencies to open space. We have adjacencies to public roads, but we also have internal walls that we've proposed that are on private property. And each of those should be looked at in the context of where they are located and what those potential impacts could be. We do believe if they're well designed, they add value to a development project. In particular, this site has view opportunities, and that can add value not only for the community that we're developing, but the surrounding community as well. Looking at the site, if we were just to grade 2-to-1 slopes all around the perimeter, we didn't feel that that would necessarily lend to a better design or a better aesthetic view. There were other concerns that we had regarding that, and I'll get into that with respect to the interface that this project has with our open space and the potential for fires. And that is actually part of one of the things that we looked at very carefully. Where we did want to be the most sensitive is where the walls are adjacent to right-of-way. That's where we have seen, at least in our perspective and the stories that we've heard about existing retaining walls, not only in Lake Forest but other areas, where the greatest sensitivity is and where we may not have done it very well in the past. So there are areas where we have retaining walls adjacent to the right-of-way. We do use decorative walls, and those can enhance a project, but there are other places where a large wall from a standpoint of scale for the public, for someone who walking on the wall, is not appropriate. So here's a survey of various walls that we took pictures of, and I want to thank one of our consultants for helping us line all these up. The company that we have been working with respect to the construction of the walls has a lot of experience with building walls and what's necessary. And from that, they have a number of photos and examples. So starting with, this is a park. As you know, we've proposed a park where there is an adjacent slope. And you can, whoops, apologize about that. You can see in some areas where the walls exist, you can't even tell that they're there. They're well screened by landscaping. But then other walls could benefit from a little better treatment there. But they are farther back from the park. So from a scale issue, it's more of a visual issue than an impact to how people enjoy the park. It's the wall along a right-of-way. It's set back from the street. Now, in this particular case, the sidewalk is on the opposite side of the street, so you don't have the scale issue, perhaps, but you do have visibility issues. In this particular case, you have a fairly large wall with the landscaping that's fairly homogeneous, and it may be something that we want to look at more variety in the landscape palette. Here's an example of a wall where you actually have a decorative wall at the bottom, and this could be something that's very desirable in creating an entryway statement, and as even the retaining wall guidelines, your cover picture shows a more organized olive orchard type of approach with walls that give a terraced feel to it. But then you have a very large wall that does not have a significant setback from the street, and where the landscaping is still needs to establish itself. It's another example of a very large wall, very close to a public right-of-way and a sidewalk. And while there is more variety in the landscaping in this particular project, there are some areas where the wall might benefit from additional coverage as the landscaping matures. Here's an example of where walls are stepped up the slope, where you have a wall closer to the right-of-way and then a slope that's graded, and then another wall farther up the slope from a scale standpoint. This tiering of the walls can be much more effective from a standpoint of how the public reacts to it. Also from the standpoint of on a major street that might be a high-speed street, you have a different feel to that street. It's not a residential street that might be a 25-mile-an-hour street. It's a 40 or 50-mile-an-hour street, which is what we do have on Glen Ranch Road. So here we have tiering, landscaping in between the sidewalk and the wall, and again, though, looking up to the upper slope, again, looking at the actual landscaping and how that wall is being viewed compared to the lower wall where the landscaping is much more effective. Similar situation here. This is more adjacent to an open space area, so this is a visibility issue. And how do we look at this wall from the standpoint of landscaping? And also being, in this particular context, we wouldn't want a highly ornamental landscaping where we're adjacent to an open space area with natural vegetation. It would seem somewhat out of place in that particular context. So we want to look at the type of landscape palette based upon what are we adjacent to. Ornamental landscaping would be very appropriate along a public street. It may not be appropriate at all when you're adjacent to open space. Another example of a wall that's really viewed from farther away, not adjacent to the right-of-way. The scale becomes a little less of an issue from that standpoint, but again, we are concerned about how does that wall look from a standpoint of visibility. Then here's an example of a golf course and the walls that were constructed and what they look like well before, I guess in the naked view as we'd call it. And then once everything's grown in, it's very, in some ways, it might be even difficult to determine that there are walls there with that type of landscaping. Again, this is a really good example of, in the context of a golf course that's adjacent to an open space area with natural landscaping, how the landscaping really needs to be more natural, using native vegetation versus ornamental vegetation, or some mix that certainly, because it's a golf course, they have a desire from a certain image. But how do you combine the two and make that compatible? And then here we get into examples where you're actually on private property where you're getting into highly ornamental landscaping that might be in the backyard or between two private properties. Another example of walls, again, on private property and how ornamental landscaping can enhance that versus just putting up a fence or something of that nature. Here's an example. We have several situations where by putting walls on the private property, we feel that that is much more context sensitive than putting the walls near the public right-of-way. This is a backyard example of where the landscaping really hasn't taken effect yet. Then over time, and this is a different backyard, but with the potential of where you have a similar wall and you have the landscaping that's grown in and how that enhances the feel of the backyard. And in some cases where most backyards will have a fence to secure the private property, this acts in some ways as that fence, but it's a retaining wall instead. I'd like to just run through. This is in your packet, and I won't take very much time on it because I know you've looked at this already, but our key project objectives. Clearly, the main objectives of developing a plan that is compatible with the existing Portola Hills community. Because the site is what I would call a cul-de-sac community. The south side is not connected to any other communities. It's abutted by Glen Ranch Road and open space. On the north, there are really no connections that are planned to the community because of the slopes and some of the desires of the community when the plan was originally brought forward during the opportunity study, that this community would not be physically connected via streets, other than there was a proposal for emergency access, as you know, where we were at La Quinta up above. But we are looking at this site where it is really a unique community and needs to develop its image in the context of the greater community of Portola Hills. We are looking to provide a balance of single-family and multifamily homes. Right now, from the original plan, our mix is skewed a little bit more towards single-family, detached homes, with less multifamily than it was originally anticipated when we started with the opportunity study. Balancing the grading for the site, we think it's very context sensitive and sustainable to do a balanced grading plan. That way there's less trips out on the local roadways, and we then look at how do we manage the construction of the site and the movement of dirt between the three major parcels. One of the big issues in this site, and you've seen this already, is it's got a lot of open space that surrounds it. So integrating this project and making it safe from a standpoint of wildfires is very, very important. And in working with Orange County Fire Authority, the retaining walls actually offer, in our opinion, and I think they would agree, an equivalent or better solution to protecting the site from a safety standpoint, which enabled them to reduce the width of the fuel management zone. And we have been able to accomplish that through negotiations with the Orange County Fire Authority, and they are supportive of the use of walls on this site and reducing that fuel management zone as a result of that. And we have a few pictures to show that. Of course, as the development team, we want to create a high-value neighborhood community. We're on a hillside. We think we should take advantage of that from the standpoint of how the site is designed from a landforms. We have a number of single-family lots, and we have great views, and we think it would be beneficial to the overall community as well to maximize this community by taking advantage of those lots. And there's a number of reasons to do that, and we'll talk about that. And then, as was mentioned earlier, there's a development agreement, and we're looking to fulfill that. There's a number of obligations that we have under that, and we've worked to fulfill that, and we are in compliance with that development agreement. So we've talked about the project description. I won't go over that again. This is the land use plan, as talked about, single family adjacent to the single family in Portola Hills, with a different mix of housing types on the south, with a small mixed use area of 10,000 square feet of commercial. We have a 5-acre neighborhood park that is a public park. The remainder of the parks in this project at the current time are being considered as private parks because of a proposal that we have made to the city to have this community gated. Therefore, since the public may have access to those parks, we're not getting credit for them as public parks, even though they're being provided at the same ratio, if you will, from a public park standpoint. Our development agreement would be 3 acres per thousand. We're achieving that with respect to the overall park acreage, but from a standpoint of credit in doing the calculation, that is a different calculation. But we are going to use trails and other opportunities for the public to enjoy this site, and I'll show that in the trail plan itself. This is the trail plan. We have an existing trail along Glen Ranch Road. That is not only a pedestrian trail, it is an equestrian trail as well that then branches up into Whiting Ranch. The trail on the westernmost portion of the site will be relocated and easements provided to Orange County Parks and the maintenance for that. You can see the various trails that run along the eastern portion where El Toro is. There's actually a trail that runs down in the Southern California Edison property that would connect up to the site. And what we've done with this project is we've actually, with the use of the retaining walls, it's enabled us to design a trail that would run from this westernmost point of the park along this edge, connect to this existing trail system, wrap back around along the east edge, and then connect back up to Glen Ranch Road. This will be a public trail that the public could walk on. It would not be affected by if the community does result in being gated. This would have a public trail easement over it. This is the open space management plan. What I would point out is the areas that are in sort of pinkish or salmon. This is our fuel management area. So you can see, other than the edge that abuts Portola Hills, where those existing slopes are, the remainder of the site essentially is a fuel management zone. We take that very seriously with respect to the history of wildfires in this area. I'm from San Diego. We've had two. They are not fun occasions whatsoever when hundreds of thousands of acres burn and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people need to be evacuated. Being able to protect this site and shelter in place, if you will, are some of the goals that we would have in working with Orange County Fire Authority. But I think it's important to see the context of this site, its adjacency to open space, and why that's such an important issue for us. I just want to cover a couple of the key retaining wall design approach that we came up with. We came up with a framework of topologies where there's three retaining wall types that we have identified. There may be more, but for this particular presentation, we're talking about the perimeter walls adjacent to open space, what we'll call public walls, which are adjacent to right-of-way, and then what we call private walls, which are on private property in between either various parcels or on HOA-owned parcels. Each one of those is a different context and may have different impacts and should be, we believe, evaluated within that context. We do see the use of ornamental walls, if you will, either stacked stone. There is already brick used on the other entryway to Portola Hills, something that is representative of the community, that creates a high-value image for the community and also provides our ability to do some identification signs for the community. And the other big issue, as I mentioned, was the fire protection and the safety of the site and working with OCFA. One of the concepts we talked about on Glen Ranch Road was to look at some additional entryway monuments. And in this particular case, what I wanted to point out is this area here where the existing sidewalk and the equestrian trail is, being very sensitive because this would be the north side of the site of how we locate walls there, where we have the highest level of activity from a standpoint of pedestrians along Glen Ranch and what their experience is. To the south, you actually drop off the site. We actually go down. So usually retaining walls on the south side of the site really don't have the same impact. In doing so, it would require us providing additional right-of-way to the city to sort of bump out those areas where we'd have these entryways, if that was something that was desirable, and providing a more entry statement to this community and how that could be accomplished. And these are the two areas that we looked at the west and the east of the site. This is a cross section. We think this is probably one of the more sensitive areas with respect to public walls. This is the Equestrian Trail here on the right with a smaller wall. The pedestrian is closer to the right-of-way. And then, of course, the reason for that is we want to keep the horses as far away from cars as possible. In the event that somebody wants to honk and say hi, the horse might not appreciate that. So our experience with the equestrian trails, I think it's pretty well founded, is to keep that trail as far away from the right-of-way as possible. But the scale there, as you can see, is a very short wall here, a slope before you get to the larger walls that would be then landscaped before coming up to the actual development pad well above the street. This is just a quick simulation we put together, not based in any reality, really. We picked up a decorative wall, what the scale of a horse would be, and runners. It looks like they're on the same trail. It's not meant to be that they're on the same trail, because in this case, maybe they would run on that, but they also may jog on the sidewalk. But this is an idea of what that look and feel would be if you were on Glen Ranch Road. So what I'd like to then go into are the perimeter walls and how, in working with Orange County Fire, they really do provide an opportunity for an effective fire break. This is a graphic that we put together based upon our analysis of flame spread and things of that nature, looking at fuel load, a 2-to-1 slope, and then as you get into the fuel management area. So you can see from a standpoint of the fuel management area, you don't have a high flame spread there. However, our experience with fires, as you know, is it's not so much the flames that are closer to the residents, it's the fuel load that is lower in the property, where you get these large 40 to 50-foot flames blowing embers over the top of the property, and in some cases over the top of the first row of homes, landing on the second row of homes. Had this experience numerous times. It happened in San Diego because many of these major fire events are when we have a Santa Ana condition. So you have winds anywhere from 25 to 60 miles an hour. So you want to be very sensitive to how, what is that, the ashes that get distributed by that particular event. Here's an example of what happens with the use of retaining walls. We still have a fuel management zone, although it's narrower, but because the walls are high, the magnitude of the flame to the wall in this particular case, when you look at the distance requirements, is much different. And it certainly provides a much better defensibility, if you will, for these particular properties. So these are examples from our studies of flame, of fuel load, and the like. I mentioned the 3 types of walls that we identified: perimeter walls, public walls, and private internal walls. The perimeter walls primarily are MSE walls, and the reason for those, mechanically stabilized earth, excuse me for being very loose with the acronym. We know that the Portola Hills community has a history of geologic instability. And as good as we could have possibly have been 25 years ago and 30 years ago in planning this community, we also know that there have been problems in Portola Hills with cracked slabs, with some subsidence and things like that. And it's affected various properties, both public and private, in that community. We are part of that overall geologic formation. And in studying that and doing extensive borings, well beyond what have been done for typical projects, the use of these walls does provide the opportunity to better stabilize that site and prevent subsidence. That's a very important issue, obviously, given the history. Regarding the public walls, MSE walls also are proposed, and in this case, landscaping will be very important, but also some decorative walls around the entryways. And finally, the private interior walls will have MSE walls in one area because of our ability to grade and stabilize, and we would not be able to go off property using a soil nail wall, which essentially is, if you will, caissons that go vertically down into the stable formation to stabilize the fill that would be put in, and then using rear and side yard block walls to manage the topography of the site. One of the things that we think is an opportunity is to really vary the horizontal and vertical elevations rather than having a more flat site, if you will. Because there's a lot of topography here, it creates some visual articulation, if you will, and interest to the site when looking from afar. We all like the examples of Europe and the hillside communities, Amalfi Coast, things like that. We're not talking about that type of design, but clearly there's some benefit, if you will, when there's an opportunity to do context-sensitive grading and landform to show that from a visual standpoint. So these are photo simulations. They're not all the simulations that are in your package. If you'd like to see more this evening, we do have additional, they're available, but to finish this presentation, we just wanted to show a few basic examples for you and the public. This is not the full amount that we included in your binder. So on perimeter walls, this is a view from the east. You can see here from Wandering Trails, looking to the west. We wanted to show, this is the perspective that we're going to show. You recall we parked at the down below at El Toro and Glen Ranch, and this is looking up at the site in its natural condition. This would be probably not day one, because there would be the walls that get built before homes get built, but just looking at where you have a simulation of homes and walls prior to landscaping. And then at 5 years, how landscaping could be put in. How, in this particular case, this is not a fuel management zone to the from this area to as you progress west on Glen Ranch, but as you go to the east, you can see a very different palette here where we get adjacent to not only the open space area, but this is a fuel management area. So we have to look at a different palette there. But we can be more ornamental as we are not in the fuel management zone. And then I believe that was the 1 year, and this would be the 5 year. This is another simulation, in this case looking from the west up Glen Ranch Road. This is the site in its natural condition. This would be what the site would be from a developed standpoint as you're driving east on Glen Ranch. And this would be the landscaping. Again, you can see the transition of landscaping from ornamental, where it's closer to Glen Ranch Road, to where we move to the open space and we need to look at a fuel management zone palette. And then this is at the 5 year mark. Now I'd like to give you some examples of what we call the public retaining walls, which are closer to the right-of-way. The primary area would be the entryway at Saddleback Ranch Road and Glen Ranch, and the entryway as currently proposed to the project. So you can orient yourself. You see Glen Ranch in the foreground with Saddleback going off to the left. This is the current condition of that intersection. You can see it's already significantly graded from the mass grading that was done in the 1980s and 90s. We're pretty much holding to that landform in the foreground, but using retaining walls really as a decorative statement in this particular case, and as a community identification and entryway. In this case, we would be looking at something more organized. We kind of like the olive orchard concept, but something that's a little more organized from a ornamental landscape palette. And then this is once things have taken effect, you can see that the use of either olive trees or oak trees as they're in this area. Again, this is not a fuel management zone, so we're able to do a lot more ornamental landscaping in this particular area. Again, this is the entryway to the community. We do want to maintain some view of the what I'll call the decorative walls, because they're actually part of the design of the community. It's another view looking to the northeast. This is the current condition. You can see the split rail there where the Equestrian Trail is. These are the walls as we're looking east on Glen Ranch, and also with the median in Glen Ranch Road will be added. That's one of the requirements that is in the plan. So that will also be landscaped. You can see, again, this is more an ornamental palette. And then once it's grown out with respect to the mature landscaping, as trees start to grow up and become more mature. So lastly, I want to cover the private walls, and these are walls between private property, and primarily on HOA are the ones that we're most interested in talking about, because those are the larger walls. We did show you the backyard. Whoops, I guess I don't have that. We can pull that out, or we'll show you on the exhibits. I apologize about that. This is the cut fill map for the project, so we did want to show you where dirt has to move across the project. We don't have quite as extensive a grading on the west parcel, but we do have to move some dirt around. And with the use of retaining walls, there's certain material that is used for backfill. Not all of the fill material that's on the site should be used for backfilling the walls, so we do have some movement of dirt for that purpose. You can see more grading on the northeast parcel to deal with the topography. And on the south, you can see the cut and fill there, where this large area right here is where the current detention basin is, on the where the park will eventually be, the neighbor park will be located. This is the before and after of the landform. See if this works. This is looking east, and there it morphs into the project. So in looking at the existing topography, where we're going from what the existing topography is to what our proposal is on the site. This is looking before and after, looking north. You can see the site, your attention to this large knoll here and the detention basin here. And then developing the site. In many ways it looks like we're grading the site pretty flat from this perspective because it's such a large site. We do have to manage issues with street grades and things like that in order to navigate this site with the topography. And this is looking to the west, and in the foreground would be El Toro Road. And again, preserving that natural topography, and essentially there's not many retaining walls along this edge where we're actually just cutting, it's kind of a daylight cut, if you will, to where we find the level area. But still you see in the case of the south, in particular, how this portion of the site is below Glen Ranch Road for the all along it, and the site steps down towards the Southern California Edison property where the power lines are. That ends the presentation. I think I got done under an hour. Might have set a record there. So we're available for questions, and we talked about we might want to move some of the exhibits up so you can see them, and so the public can also have better access to them. But whatever your pleasure is, let us know. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant? Okay.
You mentioned the, I just saw it at the end here, and I missed it earlier, the detention basin. On the as-built or the proposed grading plan, I didn't see where that, I assume it's still being accounted for, but I didn't see where it was.
Yes, it is. However, we're using a different solution. Now there are many other opportunities where we can detain below ground in vaults and then develop on top, such as a parking lot or things of that nature. So the proposal that we've developed is to actually, rather than building or digging a big hole in the ground, is to use a series of vaults for both treatment and for detention. The industry has come a long way with respect to treating water not only from a stormwater standpoint for water quality, but also for hydromodification. And all of that will be underground. So we will not have an open basin on the site. Actually, I take that back there. I think we have an open basin on the eastern portion of the site. But for the most part, it will be underground in vaults.
And just for my own information, the basic difference between a detention and retention. Retention would be something that would allow the water then to migrate back into the ground, as a detention may go on to treatment in a sewer network, or can you explain about what's going on there?
We are, I think there's a reference to low-impact development and having a lot of the water stay on site and to percolate back in. Everyone we've talked to, we pretty much are in agreement that's not a good idea in this particular area because of the geotechnical issues. And we believe that in all honesty, not getting water off the site in an appropriate manner is what causes some of the subsidence problems that we've had. We are required, though, from a hydromodification standpoint, which is the volume, how fast the water runs off the site, we retain it for that purpose so we don't have downstream erosion. So we treat it, and then we hold it back and let it exit the site in a measured fashion so it doesn't create downstream impacts to the drainage system through erosion, where you have too much water running off the site in the developed state.
Thank you. Another question for you. Some of the exhibits that you prepared for us, the Signal Hill, I think it was Sycamore Creek, and
the existing photos?
Existing
Yes.
photos. Those were fairly representative of what we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
Particularly from the standpoint that they're large mass areas of retaining wall, and when you get a vegetation failure, now you have basically a vegetation failure in a large mass area. The one that you showed for Pelican was a great shot and more representative of what would be more manageable, in that if you had a failure it would be in a smaller area, more easy to correct. Looking at the proposed retaining wall plan, virtually everything is of significant mass. So that raises a bit of a concern. Every place probably except facing the wilderness area where it's not as critical. We want our residents to be able to be comfortable that they're not looking at retaining walls, and we've got some nice attractive things to see there. Yet there are some massive walls there. Do we have any alternative plans that we can look at, or any suggestions that may have been put out there that might show some alternatives for breaking up those massive walls into smaller segments?
Well, let me first comment to your concern about the operations and maintenance of the walls and a failure, if you will, of maintaining the landscaping. First of all, the fuel management zones have to be maintained, and they actually may be more sensitive. The last thing you want to have happen in those zones is to have vegetation take over and increase the fuel load. So we will be obligated through the homeowners association to make sure that those fuel management zones are managed so that that fuel load is down. And I know you're very familiar with the requirements of a fuel management zone. You're not allowed to put larger trees and things that create a lot of fuel load. So we have revegetation plans. In some areas we'll do cactus. For the cactus wren, it's actually beneficial. It was found that in the previous fires that certain areas were safe harbors for the cactus wren, and the biologists believe that by revegetating certain areas of the fuel management zone with cactus will actually become a safe harbor if there is another event. That's what they found. So there's a benefit also biologically from that solution, and we will have an obligation to maintain those fuel management zones. With respect to the more ornamental ones, those will be managed through the homeowners association and making sure that there's an adequate budget and that there's any other securities that are necessary to make sure that we don't have a failure. So I do want to comment, I know there's experience with that, but we're very interested in making sure that those are maintained appropriately, not only for safety purposes, but for the overall value of the property. To your question of did we look at other designs, we've gone through a number of iterations of how do we stage the walls throughout the site so that we can navigate 100 or 200 feet, if you will, of topography change. And we also looked at what if we graded the site just to 2-to-1, and how would that affect the development footprint and the ability to deliver, in the case of the north, 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. Those are fairly large lots. And what happens when you grade, as you can imagine, if you do a 2-to-1 grade at the top of the slope or at the top of the project, the bottom of the project, at some point that development footprint that you're able to actually build on begins to get smaller. And that, as we looked at that as far as how much land would be affected by that, it became more and more difficult to achieve the minimum lot size of the zoning we have on the north. What we proposed on the north were 5,000 and 6,000 square foot lots. We wanted to have some variety in the community, and that allows not only, say, 3 or 4 models on a 5,000 square foot lot, but 3 or 4 models on a 6,000 square foot lot. So it provides a little bit of diversity to the single family home type that we would put on the property. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, the use of retaining walls has increased our ability to put more single family in this community than we originally anticipated. So we have less multifamily. You probably recall that was a sensitivity of the neighborhood in Portola Hills as the amount of multifamily housing that is in this community. Our response to that was to look at how could we increase the amount of single-family detached housing, and we've done that by a variety of lot sizes, using some creativity in the types of homes that we're building, and that's enabled us to reduce the number of multifamily homes on the market side to 260, and we do have an obligation to 57 affordable units, which would be in a multifamily project. That is significantly below what we thought we'd do originally. So there have been some other benefits, again, in trying to respond to community concerns. What is the benefit of putting walls in? Well, one of the benefits is, from a density standpoint, more single-family homes, higher protection from a fire management standpoint. So those are things that we looked at. But we did, and this is where we've come up with our proposal, but we certainly want to take your feedback. We may be able to do some additional work and show you some of the things that we learned through our design process.
And I appreciate your comment, and I'm not necessarily opposed to retaining walls when they're done appropriately. We've seen some examples of some very nice finished product using retaining walls. The landscaping is done appropriately. My concern is if we have a failure of the vegetation in the retaining wall. Has there been any discussion about having some sort of a bond in place for a period of time that might, you're done, you've moved out, basically the city and the residents now have this project in our hands, and we get a failure, and something has to be done to address it. Has there been any discussion about putting a bond in place?
I think there's a couple ways we could approach that. I've got I've got enough experience knowing that cities are a little reticent even to pull a bond on something like that. But I do think there are ways to address that. We'd be happy to bond for that work. It may be that we want to ensure that work in another manner so it gets done. I don't know the history of the Osterman Wall, but I understand that that was probably the poster child for how not to do it, because that wall ended up not being landscaped and was in a very, very poor condition for the community for a very long time. We don't want to end up in a similar situation, and we're very sensitive to that, to where we do all the infrastructure for the site, mass grade it, install the walls, and then we have another downturn in the home market, and we don't build homes. And you end up with a site, much like you have today in some ways, although you don't have walls, which was mass graded and then it stopped. So I am very sensitive to those comments about making sure that once those walls are in place, that we finish the walls regardless of whether homes get built. Because there'll be a long-term impact to the community if there was a delay in delivering the homes. So I want to look at it from that standpoint of making sure that we have requirements, much like you do when you landscape a right-of-way. You build the street, we have plans that say we have to landscape that street, and then we have a 1 or 2 years before it's accepted by the city and that we're obligated to. In this case, we're not turning it over to the city, so we have to make sure that we come up with another mechanism so that those walls get landscaped regardless of what happens in the community.
You mentioned the Ostman Project, and it's a good example, and it is a poster child both for both ends of the spectrum. As you know, when it started out, it was a tremendous eyesore and a significant challenge for the city. In the end, it has turned out to be an example of what can be done with a very bad situation. And you drive down there now, and you can be driving down through a canyon, and you don't even know. I mean, it all blends in. It is nicely vegetated. That was done through significant efforts communication between the city and the applicant, and they worked through it in the end. Came up with something that was actually a very nice, workable solution for a very difficult situation. By suggesting that we have something in place that gives us some comfort that we will be able to address future failures, and that's exactly what I'm going towards. We want to make sure that whatever we put out there for the community, whether it's no retaining walls or all retaining walls or something in between, that we're going to have a finished product that is going to be attractive, it's going to be an asset and not a liability for the community. And that's the reason I suggest some sort of a vehicle, whatever that vehicle may be. We can look at different options, but we probably should have something in place just to assure that we're going to have what we expect to have over the long term.
Well, I totally agree with you. And in fact, one of the members of our team, Robert Day, who says he's on business in Belize, so I'm not sure to believe him or not, but he's not here this evening, but he was involved in that particular wall, and he has some real life experience with it that I don't have. But we're very sensitive to those comments, and I agree with everything you're saying. I will say this about the Osterman Wall. I still think it's too close to the street. So while it has gotten much better than it was, I still think it's pretty close to the street. So we're going to try to avoid that as well by stepping the walls back. But I'm glad to hear that maybe in that particular case, lemonade has been made out of lemons.
Chairman Verplank.
Fred? I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of my comments I wanted to make, the fact that it is closer to Osterman than it was supposed to be. When you start moving dirt, it's amazing how things move around, because it was not supposed to be that close, because the square footage at the top expanded out. The next thing you know, we have a wall adjacent to a sidewalk. And my concern that I have, and Ostman was a perfect example of a 30-foot wall that was too tall, but I look here at Lot R, and specifically 227, there's an 18-foot MSE wall. Immediately in front of it, I don't know what the separation is, but it's not much, a 17-foot MSE wall. That's 35 feet. That's dwarfed by Lot F, where I have a 30-foot MSE wall in my backyard, followed by a 25-foot wall. Okay? Now, I've had 2 pine trees removed from my backyard because of their proximity to my house that were roughly that height. Okay? It dwarfs the backyard. I don't care what you do to make that backyard feel comfortable. It's not. And that's my concern. Part of what we tried to do, and Osterman was an example, we put the 3-foot wall in front to break up that mass. And my concern is, and I've gone through and outlined all the MSE walls, is that it's mass followed by mass. And my concern is the mass, even though you put vegetation on it, if you can't put anything in front of it, you have a mass of vegetation, and it's vertical. So I don't want to have the view of vertical, even though it's green. That's my concern. If there's a way to separate it to where you have something that is more of a in scale to the individual, then going up to another one to where that 35 feet is broken up over a 30, 40-foot range, that's fine. But my concern is what's going to happen, I'll almost guarantee it, when we go to do the square footage, moving the dirt around, the stuff's going to move closer and closer and closer. So that's my primary concern with the whole MSE wall thing. So
I appreciate that, and I'd like to respond to that. First of all, the staff has also echoed that concern. And in these drawings, we've gone through extra lengths in our studies and have brought in people who build walls. Literally, we're not going to be able to let things move. I mean, if a wall changes 1 foot in height, we're going to eat it on the development pad. It's not going to move on the footprint of the site. So the staff's been very clear with us at final engineering. It's not going to come out of the public right-of-way, or it's not going to come out of certain areas. It's going to come out of the development footprint. And there's going to be a very, very narrow or small margin that there'll be allowed a deviation. I mean, I can't promise you that a 30-foot wall will be exactly 30 feet. I can tell you it will not exceed that. And staff's been very clear to us on that because of that potential. So we're going to have very restrictive requirements at final engineering. And if we messed up in tentative engineering, it's going to come out of the footprint. I do want to comment, though, and that's why we came up with these wall typographies. We see a significant difference as we look at private walls versus public walls. And let me explain that. If we build a large wall like Osterman, the public doesn't have a choice. That's the public street. They walk on it, they ride on it, they drive on it. And they have to live with that wall. When we look at walls on private property, our perspective on that is the public is not really impacted by that, and that's a private decision by someone who wants to own that home. If they don't like that wall, maybe they buy the house on top that doesn't have the wall. But they may also have a view in that house as well. So when we look at what are we protecting, and I look at the guidelines, our perspective anyway, is that private walls, there's a different context there, and there's a choice that a private party can make in those walls. On a public wall, there is no choice. You and the city are stuck with it. Lastly, an observation that we had, since we're a major home builder. When you build a flat subdivision and you back 2 homes up with a common fence for a backyard, you have pretty much 2 properties, 2-story homes, looking into each other's windows, looking down in each other's backyards. And there's a perception of privacy there that sometimes doesn't feel very comfortable to a property owner. And so we try to offset homes, try to offset windows, things like that, so someone's 2 bedrooms aren't looking right at each other. By separating homes from a vertical standpoint, that perception of privacy is increased. First of all, the view distance is much longer. You're not, say you have a 25-foot backyard, you're not 40 feet away looking into somebody's backyard. You might be 60 or 70 feet away. Also, the angle on looking into the home, into a window, is different. So the perception of privacy is enhanced by that. And it's something that we've learned, that when we build homes that are on the same pad elevation or very close to it, we have to be very sensitive to the model that we build on each lot, so that they don't create issues for a homeowner's privacy, because they're going to go up into the second floor, they're going to look out the master bedroom window, and if they're looking right in the next house's master bedroom window, that's not a good thing from a standpoint of developing a home and selling it. So we are looking at some other issues that, these are issues from a marketing standpoint that I wanted to share with you all. I don't know that changes your mind or not, but it's what we take into account when we look at the design, especially between the private properties. I wanted to share with you why we came up with a different approach to that.
Can I ask one other question? On the lots that the MSE wall is, the toe is no problem, but the top portion, those homes will not be able to penetrate that grid, is that correct? So
That's correct.
There has to be a restriction in the building that they would not be able to put a pool or anything in their backyard?
Well, actually, our intent would be that the top of the wall, where the geogrid would still be a minimum of 5 feet below the pad elevation. So that by itself should take care of the issue of any structure, such as a pool. In addition, and if you, I can have our wall guy come up and explain it, because I can't do it quite as well. But we were very sensitive to that issue. If the top of the wall is at the pad elevation, you're absolutely correct with the geogrid. But because the geogrid is below the top of the wall, and the top of the wall is 5 feet below the pad, we pretty much are dealing with any issue of a pool in the backyard. Of course, there's a building, you couldn't build a structure back there, but a pool is something that we're very sensitive to, and we've been analyzing that to make sure that we don't create that problem in the design.
First, a comment, and I certainly respect your opinion about the walls when you talk about a public wall versus a private wall. But I think that most of us on this panel might take a little bit different perspective on that. Certainly it's your land and you have certain property rights to that. But as a panel, I think it's our objective to talk about the look and feel of the whole community, not just the public community. So because you're building this project within our community, we're pretty sensitive, as you know, about the Osterman situation, about large walls. And when we see a situation, as Commissioner Carter pointed out, where we have a 30-foot backed up by a 20-foot, 5-foot wall, while it's in the middle of your project, it's still part of our community. So the idea of trying to figure out some methodology by which you can break these walls up into smaller pieces yet still retain all that hillside, I think would be much more well received by the Commission.
I appreciate that, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill.
You have a lot to deal with there. I can certainly appreciate that. I think for the sake of the public, the question came up in my mind as you were making your presentation about MSE walls work so much better for stabilization because you had so much trouble with subsidence with your previous development experience up there. Perhaps you could just give us a little compare and contrast, or maybe your wall guy could give us a little compare and contrast as to why you think you won't have those problems with your new development versus your previous development.
Well, I'll ask one of the representatives from our wall company, if you will, who would construct the walls, to comment to that. There were problems. We certainly acknowledged that there were problems up there. Some of that was where we, for instance, I think we're all familiar with the problems that occurred at the elementary school. At the end of the day, we are contributing to help mitigate those problems. When we went through that process of determining liability and fault, we weren't found at fault there. The school district also has obligations as well, but we certainly are contributing to that. I think what I believe is that we're a lot smarter now than we were then.
And that's really what I'm looking for, because you're talking about cutting off a mountain of dirt that you guys piled up there a long time ago and using it to fill in where the sports park's going to be, and it's going to be retained by a rather significant set of MSE walls.
Yes.
How are we going to be assured that it's not going to subside with the school?
I'll ask our representative who builds walls to comment on that. I would add, and I don't want to speak for the city, but we've gone through a lot of geotechnical analysis. We've done a lot of feasibility analysis above and beyond what you would normally do with a tentative map to show that we could build this and we could build it safely. And I believe that from the standpoint of the city's perspective, we are very close to proving that not only is it safe, and it's feasible. And we've done a tremendous amount of additional analysis and borings and reports that are meant to answer those questions.
And I think it adds to what Commissioner Hughes was talking about, that we just don't want to get 20 years down the road and suddenly be stuck with a pig and poke of maintenance problems.
Understood. Darian is going to come up and talk a little bit about walls.
We just ask you to please state your name and city of residence for us.
Sure. My name's Darian Osborne. I'm a registered engineer in the state of California. I actually live in Rancho Santa Margarita, just south of here. I've worked within this industry for 15 plus years, getting close actually to 20 now. As a geotechnical engineer, been registered for over 10 years now, and then now work for this wall company, soil retention. We manufacture products, we design products, and so I do all the designs for the walls that we build, and we're also an A licensed contractor that that builds as well. You know, one of the benefits of this type of system, it is a component of the overall grading. If you just put a wall just straight on the land itself, that's not necessarily the answer. The geotechnical engineer is involved. His investigation is involved. When you open up a hillside and be able to build something, one of the benefits to this type of wall system is the fact that you do open up the entirety of the ground itself, and so it's much easier to be able to draw. Is there a board to be able to explain some of this?
Chairman Verplank, I wanted to offer that if any time you or the Commission would like any of the slides from the presentation back up on the screens, just let me know. I'll be happy to pull them up for you.
Yeah, it might be more advantageous for his comments. So
yeah, I don't believe we
able to
have something to draw on, unless you want to draw on the back of one of your boards.
Well, when a geotechnical engineer is out on a site, he has the opportunity to be able to go do borings, which is basically pinpricks in a big ground and really guess what's underneath it. Try and set the model, and when it actually goes out to get to grading, they inspect and look at it, and hopefully all those assumptions are in line with what they first started with. The use of this type of wall system, we build a 20-foot wall. It has a 20-foot long reinforcement. To be able to build it, you have to actually open it up and really have a chance to take a look at it. So the assumptions that you made on the edge of a hillside, you have the chance to actually verify it, because you're definitely going to see it, instead of coming in with some type of other system where you're not going to disturb the ground and actually build something properly. I don't know exactly what happened on the other site. I imagine it was built 20, 25 years ago, somewhere in that range. Restrictions are much more, should I say, the field is much more advanced. I think there's a lot of experience that's been gained over those long years. From a dirt standpoint and just itself, dirt itself is relatively weak to strong in some capacities in compression. The way that this type of system actually works is that it gives dirt tensional strength. So if I grab a clod of dirt here and I press it, you know, it's got some resistance to it. But if I take that clod of dirt and I pull it apart, there's no strength to that. It just falls right apart. When you incorporate what we use, we call them reinforcements. They're actually a geosynthetic reinforcement called GeoGrid. GeoGrid is a tensional member. So you put a tensional member into this big clod of dirt, you try and pull it apart. Well, the GeoGrid is actually putting tension into that. And so it takes this big giant reinforced mass, it creates it, it improves it in not only compressional strength, but also in tensional strength. And you have a...
This has got a pointer. I don't know if that helps at all. Down that
Sure.
cross section a little bit.
I don't like pointers. Can I walk over here and do that? Much easier. For a wall side, for a wall somewhere like this, you've got the existing hillside that's here. You're building a tiered wall scenario. We have a reinforcement. Go back. Yeah. Jason, get you a microphone. Okay. in a wall scenario, like this here, where you, and I don't know if they didn't see me on this side as well, where you've got a wall you've got an existing hillside that's coming up.
Yeah. Try to give us some microphone there, if you will. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. There you go.
I've never even done karaoke, so. On an existing hillside like this, you're building out two walls out on the hillside. Our reinforcements would extend back into this hillside in this way. When I'm talking about being able to open something up and grade it, the geotechnical engineer, when he is out there taking a look at the site, basically has a pinprick at it. To be able to build a wall system like this, you're making a large excavation, and he has an opportunity to go in and map and look for different geologic conditions. He's doing borings all over the place, may have missed a landslide that was somewhere. You actually see that when you move the dirt. So that's really one of the benefits of this type of system. We build the system solely with large equipment. We don't use small equipment, so there's numerous shots of large scrapers that are up on top of it. You go to put a house up on top of it afterwards, that's the least of the load that the wall has actually seen during its construction. I apologize, I wasn't prepared to speak here, so I don't know if I'm rambling or if this is, you can follow it.
No, you're really doing fine. I just wanted, the five of us understand how this stuff works, but you've got a room full of people who live up there who don't understand how all this stuff fits together and have had some less than ideal experiences up there. So I think that this gives them a better idea as to what your plan calls for and how it's going to stabilize the land and certainly not have any additional effect on their existing homes.
What I can say is I do have brochures of our wall system. You can also have a link to our website to see numerous pictures of construction and also look at online brochures as well and really kind of give you an idea. I have probably 10 of them or so, and I give them away for free. So if you want them, come and grab them.
Great, thank you. Okay, before we open this up to public comment, if we could take about a 5 to 7 minute break, and then when we come back, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment.
Photo you showed, is that the actual what it would look like, or is that just kind of a build-up? Yeah, I'm Dan Graham, I live Yeah, right, yeah. No.
Saddlebags. There was no
Right.
identification. So that's what this really is all. The name of our project will probably be different. And then the greater proposals.
general announcement across the speaker nice and loud. Everybody will come to.
Okay. Okay, if we could get everybody to kind of settle down, we're going to go ahead and reconvene our meeting. Okay. Okay, I think we're all back together. Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. At this time, let's go ahead and open up to our public comments, and we've got some people that would like to address the commission tonight. And let's start with Amanda Morell.
Chair, Commissioners, I'm Amanda Morell, and I'm here as a resident of Portola Hills. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the proposed retaining walls. I appreciate the invitation for Portola Hills residents to come and participate in tonight's meeting, but I find it a little disconcerting that this topic was put on the same night as Portola Hills Elementary back to school night. So our school is really the heart of our community, and when we asked for this topic to be postponed to October 11th, we were told no. So the approach and use of retaining walls on the proposed plan is not consistent with the guidelines of the city and should not be deemed acceptable. The height and extensive use of the retaining walls as proposed are a problem because they're uncharacteristic for this area and the city as a whole. They are out of scale, they'll dramatically hinder wildlife movement, and they're a safety concern for unsupervised children. They're also a long-term maintenance issue. The diagram that I have here is color-coded by the height of the retaining walls. And if you notice on this map, this of course is focused on the northern side of the Portola Center development, the extensive amount of walls that we're talking about. So orange kind of being sort of 5 feet or below, and then pink being 30 feet, and then the full range in between. The plant material that's been shown, those simulations are also uncharacteristic of the existing surroundings. The Pelican Hill habitat restoration image that was included was the only one that I could find that actually I found appealing and acceptable relative to a natural sort of blending approach with those type of walls in the surroundings. So this is all about cause and effect. We've got existing topography, geology, landslide conditions, a history of wetting-induced settlement, and soils. And these are all a key factor in determining how to best configure this land for a safe and desirable place to live. It's also about economics and maximizing the number of units. But we need a compromise. And I don't understand why we're here talking about the specifics of retaining walls when we have a bigger issue. And that's that we're trying to shove 10 pounds of cars through a 5-pound bag at the intersection of Glen Ranch and Saddleback Ranch Road. We have yet to see an alternative that pulls the ingress and egress for those northern properties onto Glen Ranch Road. Glen Ranch Road is much more adept at being able to handle the additional vehicles than Saddleback Ranch is. And so it all sort of plays together. My time is up, and I will step away. So thank you.
Thank you. Our second our second speaker will be Ian Morell.
I'll have to skip over the duplication of my other half. My name is Ian Morell, and I live in Portola Hills. First, I'd like to thank everyone as well for both staff and for the Planning Commission especially for engaging the community on this topic. As you can tell, it's pretty dear to our hearts. And you know what our major issue is, which is traffic, of course. When this development was discussed as part of the opportunity study, we expressed a desire that the development on the north side was compatible with the existing character of Portola Hills. And thanks to the work as we went through that process, the density is comparable to what you have in Portola Hills as far as units by acre. It's very compatible. However, at that time, I don't think anyone ever imagined that it would be accomplished through the use of 3 different types of retaining walls to compensate for the undulating topology of the site. And that is not compatible with the existing homes up there or anything else around. We have slopes in between the houses. We have green belts that are used by wildlife. Now, I know a lot of the or function follows form, form being they want to have a certain number of units on there. Well, one of the interesting things is if you go back 20 years ago to when the developer made a proposal to the county to turn that into homes, they did a plan where the north side had 329 homes versus a proposed 304. And if you look at this plan, there's slopes. There are not 30-foot retaining walls. So what I'm trying to understand is if they could do higher density without retaining walls 20 years ago, why are we doing it the other way around for less? So my final point is I'd like to see some types of alternatives evaluated that consider options, and I understand the need for maintaining the unit count, and I understand the entitlements, and I think that's fair, but I think there has to be alternatives, and I think there has to be better ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a Kate Shimahi. I think you got the drill. Just state your name and city of residence.
My name is Kate Shimaji. I am the president of the Bella Palermo Homeowners Association, and our community is right on the forefront of the development on the northeast development side. Originally, when the grading was first presented to us at the elementary school, the grading for the proposed development was about 20 to 24 feet below our grade, which really didn't have a problem with that issue because, you know, we would be pretty much looking over the rooftops, not like we're looking for to have, you know, view property. But then it was reproposed with the grading and the institution of the retaining walls that now the new grade is about 5 to 8 feet below our grade. Our buildings only have maybe 6 to 7 feet between the building and where our property line fence is. And as Mr. Haas was saying about stair-stepping the homes with retaining walls, it gives you the aesthetics that you're not looking into your neighbor's bedroom window. Well, pretty much the whole length of our community is going to be looking straight into their backyards, straight into their family rooms, straight into their master bedrooms, which I don't understand that part. I also asked Mr. Haas to give us kind of an idea of how the footprint of the house would be sitting in perspective of the lot. Is it going to be sitting further back? Is it going to be sitting further towards the street? We don't know that yet, because if it's sitting further back, we're pretty much going to be reach out, touch our neighbor over the fence. Currently, we have a wrought iron fence that extends the length of our community, and we're going to have to replace that. And we're currently in the process of having our patio fencing replaced, and I did get a rough estimate from our fence guy. If we did have to replace that with a solid fence that architecturally matched what we have right now, we're looking at $60,000 to $100,000 that's going to have to come out of our community to replace that fencing. And that's another problem, because no homeowners association wants to pull that money out of reserves that we didn't plan for. So those are my questions. Those are really my concerns, and I'm here to speak for my community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Elizabeth Wallace.
Good evening. My name's Elizabeth Wallace, and I've been a homeowner and resident of Portola Hills for 25 years. I'm president of the Portola Hills 2 Homeowners Association. In 2007, we asked the city to adopt a development program for Portola Center that's similar in density and character to Portola Hills. I'm submitting the Friends of Portola interest statement to you, the planning commissioners, as a reminder of our discussions, as well as my 2012 written comments regarding grading and retaining walls. Our community opposes the Portola Center design we've seen tonight. The retaining walls degrade the visual unity of our neighborhood. They impede wildlife migration and violate the city's retaining wall guidelines. Why are 25 and 30-foot retaining walls being considered when they violate the standards that we rely on to ensure quality development? If it is because, as Baldwin claims, they need the walls to increase their development footprint, then I'm here to ask you, on behalf of the 6,000 residents who will be directly impacted by this project, to use your power to improve Portola Center while it's still in the planning stages. You control the project's design parameters, not me, not the citizens of Portola Hills, not Baldwin, but you're who we rely on. So I ask you to envision the possibilities of Portola Center to ensure that when it's completed, it can be a project that neighboring residents can live with. First, we need to see the project as a whole. The fragmentary retaining wall illustrations that Baldwin has submitted are misleading. Please insist Baldwin provide a schematic of the entire site that includes retaining walls, color-coded by height. When you look at the schematic that Ian and Amanda Morell presented, you can see 90 feet of retaining walls stacked on top of each other near the Whiting Ranch entrance. It's just easier to understand the impact. Second, we ask you require Baldwin to provide alternative designs for Portola Center. Baldwin's plan squeezes a maximum number of large lots on the north side of the project. The lot footprint drives the inappropriate heights of the retaining walls. Consider smaller lot sizes, not increasing the number of homes on the north side, but showing an area of smaller lots that reduce building mass, thereby reducing wall heights. Portola Hills is a unique site that raises complex challenges to development. This project cannot be rushed. The plan Baldwin presented tonight sacrifices human-scale design and increases traffic hazards at our intersections to maximize Baldwin's profitability. Maximizing profit and sacrificing community safety are Baldwin's proven legacies. We rely entirely on your service, your knowledge, and your adherence to city guidelines to protect our community's safety and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan Jansen.
Good evening. My name is Jan Erik Jansson. I live in San Diego. I'm the owner of the company with the MSE walls. I also invented the system. I want to address safety and plantability. We had similar discussions here with Orange County 1988-89. And we have been building walls in Orange County, hundreds of them, and we are holding up billions of dollars here. We have a perfect record of no failures. When you do grading today, you create engineered fills, so it is very highly inspected as you go, and it's a safe system. We have a track record of 25 years. No settlements, no lawsuits, no insurance claim, nothing. I wouldn't sleep if we had, so all builders are people too, you know. As far as plantability, we have a truly plantable system. However, 10% or 15% of developers may not care after. Home builders usually do because they're on the hook for 10 years, but maybe there's a fly-by-night who doesn't care and you have a bare wall. The wall here in Lake Forest, they went bankrupt, so that's why that wall doesn't get planted for 2 years, I think. The walls are truly plantable. I agree with Mr. Hughes. There should be means to keep the developers' feet to the fire to maintain it, and even that should also go over to the homeowner association over time. Yeah, the walls are beautiful too, but that's not my point. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. David Herzberg.
Hello, I'm David Herzberg, and this is my wife, Lynn, who's going to assist me on my first point. I'm going to make 3 points tonight. So, my first point is I'd like to talk about some real-world perspective. We always get these really beautiful PowerPoints and charts and pictures, but let's just do something in the real world. Okay, let's go 5. Hold on. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah, that's 5. Let's go to 10. Keep going. Whoa. Let's see. That's 10. Mr. Anderson, would you help us here a second? Let's go to 15. Okay, I gotta, okay, we're at 15 now. Okay, let's go to 20. Do this. Yeah, we're at 20. Okay, let's go to 25. Thank you. 30. There we go. Okay, we're at 30 feet, and let's think about this vertical. Okay, that's point number 1. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay. My second point is, and this kind of came out of a discussion with Elizabeth, the lot size, especially on the northern parcels, is defining and dictating the design versus good design, dictating what those lots should be and the way the retaining walls, and if we need retaining walls. And I just have to ask, it's 5,000 and 6,000 square foot lots. What if we shave a little bit off these lot sizes? Could we humanize? Could we get rid of some of these walls? Could we change the characteristic of the community to make it fit in with our existing community? So that's lot size. Can we just maybe talk about that and think about how that can affect the overall look of this? And then I'm going to kind of bring up something that Amanda brought up. And I'm confused. I keep getting confused about this. So I'm going to call it the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We are against this intersection above Glen Ranch and Saddleback Ranch, the new intersection. We keep seeing designs. I mean, I have yet to see another site plan without that intersection there. And I'm confused. I am just confused. We're having all these meetings. Why aren't we seeing a site map option because we know that totally changes what they have to do with the retaining walls, if we need the retaining walls. So maybe somebody can explain to me why we never see an option.
Chairman and members of the Commission, we're running two parallel courses here. Many of you were with us when we had the area-wide traffic workshop, the traffic calming workshop, and we have a whole series of additional meetings planned for that. And we will be looking at different alternatives. The applicant wanted to get feedback on his retaining walls. This is their current proposal. This is not whatever comes out of our traffic meetings, whatever access is looked at through that, eventually will get put into the tentative map submittal. But in order to keep the project moving forward, the applicant specifically asked to be able to come to the Planning Commission to get the feedback on the retaining walls. And so even if we change, if the access is moved to the other side, we're still dealing with our top elevation, our Glen Wrench elevation, and how you get from one end from the top to the bottom. So I think even changing the access, the concept of these retaining walls, the feedback that they get tonight can be input into whatever access solution is decided upon. So important to get the feedback. Yes, the site plans will change, but it's important input that the applicant has asked for.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Oh, thank you. Was there anyone else that wanted to address us tonight on this topic? Great. Well,
hi, my name is Gloria Perkins. I live on Dorado. A couple of things came up listening to all the different discussions. The first one that comes to mind is they always seem to have slides that justify what they're trying to tell us. But I go stand and I look at these hills or whatever. They don't seem like they really fit what their slides are trying to represent to us. When they've shown us other photos, this goes back to traffic, they've shown us where they've had right turn lanes, bicycle lanes, center dividers for different things and stuff. But here's where the streets are right now. Here's where the slopes are right now. There is no room for them to do the streets that they're talking about doing. The only other way to do it is to cut what's there, which gives us more big retaining walls. I understand their bottom line is financial. They need to put as many homes as possible onto this lot, onto this whole area. If the surface at the top is the most expanded for the most homes, that means we've got to have more walls because it's all out there with just nothing but wall, 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 wall. If the entire thing is reduced in home size, where they can change the grading so that instead of having all these steep walls, they do more gentle grading, they can have smaller walls. When we talk about some of the retaining walls, I believe it's called Verduna, we have some of that. I think it's where the water pumping station is on Glen Ranch and the signal where Oakley comes out. I've lived here 8 years. That landscaping has never looked good. It looks horrible. As well as I believe that kind of landscaping, creeping fig, all of that, is going to increase our rat problem, which we have up there. And I think they brought their own rope to hang themselves. This brochure shows walls that I don't think they're 30 feet, but this is a picture of everything we do not want. So if you would like this, I'd be happy to give it to you.
well, thank you very much. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to? Okay.
Just to clarify.
For the record, please restate your name for us.
My name is Darian, resident of Rancho Santa Margarita. Just to clarify really quickly about the walls that she was referencing, that's a different type of system called a crib wall system. It's actually technology that's not quite used as much. There were rampant issues with that, but it's an entirely different system than what ours is. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay. Would you like to readdress us?
It's not just the look of the walls, it's the heights of the walls that they're just plain ugly.
Yeah, great, yeah. I think you get the flavor for what we're trying to do here tonight, and that is to have this forum so that we can keep, as Mrs. Ackerman already said, is keep the process moving forward. Nothing's being decided here tonight. This is a workshop, and there's going to be more workshops, just like there's going to be more traffic workshops. This is just another step in getting the public feedback so that we can achieve what we all want, which is the best development for our community. Okay, and we do appreciate your input and your feedback. So, okay. We have one more? Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, Stephen Haas with the project team. I know we're going to get a homework assignment tonight, and we're happy to do that. There are a couple things, though, I do want to address so that the public understands that. We have a development agreement, as was explained by Ms. Kuta tonight, and we have a zoning on that property that's been approved by the City Council with a 5,000 square foot lot minimum. To do any analysis for smaller lots would require an amendment to the development agreement. At this point in time, our company is not interested in doing that, and I'm not sure if the city is either. So I just want to let you know the legal issues that are involved with some of the recommendations that are being made by the public. That development agreement was entered into in good faith. It also provided extraordinary public benefit to the city, as you are well aware. So some of these recommendations would not comport with that development agreement, which is our contract with the city. So as you make recommendations to us, I would hope that you would take that into account with respect to the legal framework that we are working under tonight. And while I appreciate the comments from the community, I do need to make that distinction, as it was made earlier this evening by the city staff. We're happy to do homework assignments that we think will be very productive. Some of them, I'm not sure that they would be as productive as others. So I hope that at the end of the night, when you give us that homework assignment, that you'll take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to address the commission, sir? Okay. Before you do leave, make sure you fill out a speaker card for us.
I will do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. My name is Jaco van Rensburg. I live up in Portola Hills. Thank you for the opportunity to say just a few brief words. As the developer has pointed out, they're all about the money. We live in that community, and we would like to protect that as far as possible in terms of just the quality of life. But that's not the point that I want to make. The point that I want to make is they've done all these studies haphazardly. Then they've done the traffic study on this side, then they do the retaining wall on this side, then they do something there. Nowhere we've seen the complete picture, and the gorilla in the room that's been pointed out a few times tonight is the traffic issue, and that's not being addressed. Now, I don't know what the legal ramifications might be for the city, but we are the taxpayers of the city, and I think we can cut our losses by cutting this development now than trying to sit with the troubles 20 years later, like what we've had with the schools movement of the soil and stuff that we had to deal with as taxpayers as well as the community. So that's all I want to point it out. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay. Okay. Well, any conversation up here? Okay. Oh, we have another speaker. All right.
Let's let him go first.
My name's Steve Coover. I live at the top of the hill near Concourse Park in the high density, I guess, or whatever, condominiums. Nobody from my association of 225 units felt the need to come down tonight. They're not thinking it would really do a bit of good. As much as I've tried to cajole people and get them to come down, they won't. Besides traffic issues, which for me I have three ways off the hill because of my intersection of Ridgeline, I still have to go down through there. The slope is steep. Retaining walls in general, even if you undercut, go horizontally, you can supply as much structural support as you think you need. You can even go 150% of what you think you're going to need. All it takes is one thing. Living at the base of Santiago Peak as we do, the geology comes down into a valley, back up to a hill, back down again. We're in a zone of compression. Everything shifts, and it will never shift the way you think it will, even if you cut it all down and stack it up like Lego bricks. as beautiful or ugly as some people think retaining walls are, my primary worriment, besides traffic, which I can't talk about tonight, on what is called the northwest development, which is right near Whiting Ranch. Why are there even homes there? It's a beautiful open space now, used as a park by many, just like what is now Concourse Park used to be as well. They could put the park there and not have to put 35, 50 feet of retaining wall at all. It'd be a beautiful sloping park, still have some homes around the border. There are other design ideas, and I believe the agreement was, what did I hear, 800 to 930 total homes. As long as we're within that, I don't see why some of the lots in the middle of that development could be removed and have a park in place. It's my secondary concern, but thanks for listening.
Thanks for coming. Okay, another one.
My name's David Hussey. I'm a resident of Portola Hills. I live on Millwood, so I directly overlook the what would be the northwest parcel. But I'm just, and I'm an engineer, so I'm looking at drawings all the time, and I'm sitting there looking at the drawings for the northeastern side there, where you have the high retaining walls. You're talking about the lot size being 5,000 square feet. Looking at the drawing over there, a lot of those lots are in the 7,000 to 8,000 square foot size, with about a 75-foot vertical elevation between them, where they're back to back to each other, with what appears to be, without a scale, looks to be about 50 feet of horizontal distance for the 75 feet of vertical distance. So it looks like other people have discussed the large lot sizes are driving the height of the walls. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll keep asking. You keep speaking. Is there anyone else? Okay, go ahead. Come on, Elizabeth, and readdress us.
I'm Elizabeth Wallace, resident of Portola Hills. I think I understood Mr. Haas said that Robert Day, their designer, designed Osterman. Did I misunderstand that? Oh, okay. Because that frightened me a little.
No.
So I'm wrong about that.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right. Good. Okay. All right. So are we're wrapped up then? Is that it? Okay. All right. Well, discussion up here, gentlemen.
I'll be brief. Let me go that. The first thing I want to just mention is that this retaining wall issue has come up many times now since we finished our design guidelines. And, we're fortunate to have new development in this area, which is helping our community in general in a lot of different ways. But at the same time, we wanted to match up with the existing areas. And retaining walls is one of the areas that can most quickly deter from the nice look of a neighborhood. We found that out on Osterman. And the one thing I will say about that is that although it looks reasonably good now, and we can say that it's well covered and everything, the flip side is if we had a choice and do that all over again, we wouldn't do it, even if we knew it would come out like this. So the one thing I think we need to make very clear, and I'll speak just for myself, but judging from my compadres, I think they have similar views. I would be very hard pressed to approve any 30-foot retaining wall. And you wanted feedback, I'm sure, and that's just my feeling. And it's not because I don't believe that they're solid. I have an engineering background too, and so I think that they can be built to withstand time and the elements, but it's really an aesthetics issue. The big sheer walls close up to either a home or to a sidewalk or public right-of-way is just not the kind of look that we want. And in some of the areas in the city that we have it, we're not proud of it. So we don't want to have that continue. So that's my feedback, is that I would like to see an alternative. I know you have to get a lot of lots in a small space and a lot of different elevations to deal with. But so far, we found that every developer, so far, and we had one that came with 30-foot retaining walls over long expanses, they were able to basically cut those in half, put a 2-to-1 slope between them, and come out with a neighborhood that's going to look so much better than having those big, large walls. So that's my my suggestion is come back with an alternative for us. The other one is come back with an alternative for us on the traffic light. We need to have some other alternatives there too. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Well, I'm going to echo Mr. Zechmeister, because the 30-foot wall height is, to me, just too far out of scale. A part of our design guidelines was to break that 30-foot. If you got to go 30 feet, find a different way to do it in a terracing type of a manner, to where you've got some distance between the wall and the person. Bring it down to some personable relationship. 30 feet is simply too high. If it's I'm afraid of a 30-foot high wall covered with green. It's a green 30-foot high wall. And unless you have trees or something in front of it that breaks it up, it's still a 30-foot high green wall. So and that's basically where I'm at. I do echo what Commissioner Zechmeister has said.
Let me add just one thing to it, too. I understand the difference between public right-of-way, and we're talking about field of view, so we don't want that sheer wall right near a street, and you've done a good job of trying to shelter that. However, having basically 60 feet of slope, or almost sheer wall, with a 30-foot and a 30-foot, or 20-foot and a 30-foot, literally feet, a few feet behind a house, means that I can see that from next door or from the street. I can see that slope. It's going to tower above the house. So it's not like it's invisible to the rest of the neighborhood.
Any other comments? You got it? Okay. Okay, well, we've had our discussion on this item, and I think that brings that to a close here tonight for now. I'm sure staff will be working with the applicant, and that pretty much wraps it up, doesn't it? Okay, we can take that on then, and let's move into director comments.
I have no comments this evening.
Mr. Richardson, comments?
I have no comments.
Okay. I'll start with Mr. Carter since Mr. Hughes is busy.
No comment this evening.
Vice Chairman Anderson?
I really don't have any comments as usual, but I'll say a couple things anyway. Just actually two things that I've been able to do the last, since we were here last. I did have an opportunity to go up to Portola Hills personally and tour the neighborhoods and tour the streets and tour the slopes, and I would encourage any of you that would like to do that to contact any of those people out there, and I know that they'd be happy to take you around, and it's really worthwhile. The other thing I got an opportunity to do, though, was to go through the James A. Music Facility, and since that's going to be something that's going to be talked about more in our future, I would also encourage you to go take a look at that. You'll have a much better idea as to what they have planned, how it impacts us, and just up close and personal, you have a much better understanding how it all fits. Great work, staff.
Commissioner Zechmeister?
I have no comments tonight.
Commissioner Hughes?
No comments this evening.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank the public for coming out tonight. As usual, you are very supportive, and we do appreciate the feedback, and we look forward to future workshops. Staff's done a great job, and I just want to remind staff that I will be absent the October 11th meeting, and Okay.
I forgot to mention I'll be gone for that meeting also.
Okay. And with that, we will adjourn tonight's meeting to the next regular scheduled meeting of the Lake Forest Planning Commission.